Hey everybody, so welcome to another video on Simply Said. Thanks so much for joining. I got a few requests to bring in a person that I know as a financial advisor. I will say he's made me a lot of money and I appreciate it. So I just wanted to kind of let him on the platform to go over why it's important to create generational wealth. It's important to invest. He'll talk about his own background. And also, most important, since we have a matriarchy, a lot of times in our community, in the African American community, we have women who are the providers, not for just themselves, but for their children and unfortunately other family members. So I will go ahead. I'm calling this here the OWG moment, old white guy moment. Okay. So without further ado, let's go ahead and talk to who I consider, just awesome. So kind of give us an idea about your background, which you will remain anonymous, about your background, please.
Sure. So I'd like to start with really my background, meaning really, really old history. And it all started with my mom and I, because my mom was a single mother, and we are talking about in the 50s, the 1950 era, just so you know. Mm-hmm. And then what had happened was that when the term latchkey children came about, I didn't know I was a latchkey child. I didn't know that, but I was. And the other thing is that I grew up thinking I was wealthy. And the reason why I thought that, and so it gets to attitude, I want to make sure I mention that. This is all about attitude at a very young age. My attitude was I grew up wealthy because I saw my initial on the top of a Swanson TV dinner, and I concluded that all my dinners were provided to me on a silver platter. So if you can find the humor in that, I'm just sharing, again, keep in mind the period in the mid-50s, I thought I was wealthy. What I didn't know is my mother was working 3 jobs in order to just keep us in a very, very dirtbag place in the west side of the community that we lived in at the time. And so that attitude, however, carried forward into a lot of the things that I developed in my investment strategy as well. And that is you have to think right from the get-go that you can do anything. You can do anything with a couple of really simple ideas. Mm-hmm. One is having the right frame of mind, thinking to yourself that you're disciplined, and discipline is a very big, important part of investing. And so in investments, you have to play the long term. You cannot panic. You always have to play the long term. I was a very, very early investor in Starbucks. If people know about Starbucks, I actually bought Starbucks shares at $18 a share.
Wow.
I've had multiple splits throughout the course of my ownership of Starbucks. And it actually got me through just that one stock, got me through a 3-year period in my life where I didn't have any income whatsoever. So that's what I mean by playing stocks and investments for the long term. So those are 2 big things, attitude and investments. And the last item I'll mention, because it was in your introduction, is that my mom never remarried, so it was just my mom and I. I'm an only child, and I will tell you that my mom had 3 businesses that she started all on her own in the 60s when women were not considered to be business owners, and then she ultimately went on to own a restaurant that she sold and retired from, and she is now 93 years old today and living in a very nice environment, so to speak, in like a retirement community.
But a quick question.
At the end of the day, my point is that women have the power to do anything they want to do without a man, period.
Awesome. Now, quick question. What I want to know, and can you kind of expand? Of course, I have my view because I'm a long-term investor as well. But when you say about discipline, in my opinion, I'm thinking when it comes to discipline, if you're going to invest, you also have to be, and again, I'm just asking, you have to be around, watch the people you're around, because I've noticed some people will start to invest and they may lose a little money, you know, and then they're around other people that are not investment savvy or financially savvy, and they're like, oh my gosh, I knew that was going to happen to you. You should go ahead and bail out now. What's your response to that? You have to be careful who you surround yourself with, or don't talk investments to everybody if you are a beginner in investing and you're not, you know, you don't have a lot of people around you that believe in investing. So what is your response?
That's an excellent question. And because you can surround yourself very, very easily, and I'm talking about family, with friends, of negative people. That's what I talk about discipline. You cannot allow outside influences in a negative form to impact what your goals are. You need to set goals and be disciplined about achieving those goals. And the truth is, the longer horizon you have the plan, the better off you're going to be. And oh, by the way, you can start this at $100. You do not need to have a ton of money. And one of the things that I've talked about, and in fact, I've talked to you about specifically because of where you are in your age group, is to try and find stocks that offer dividends.
Yes.
And if you hear me talk about stocks, it's because I do believe in the equity market, not in the bond market today, just because of your rate of return. But you find a dividend-bearing stock that you're comfortable with, and I'll talk a little bit about that too, and how you get comfortable with a stock. But if you find that dividend-bearing stock, I'll give you another great example. Is the reason why I did so well with Starbucks, because Starbucks is a dividend-bearing stock. So is companies like AT&T, most of your major banks that are out there. But these people return dividends on a quarterly basis to the investor. And what you do is you always select, if you're under 60 years of age, you always select dividend reinvest.
Yes.
That's an option. And that helps you build your portfolio without you putting out another dime.
Now, quick question. What about each community differs, and people also differ based on what they're exposed to, okay? So you may still have, and it breaks my heart to say this, you may still have some people that are non-believers in investing. So my thing is, if you don't believe in it for yourself, why not invest for your children? So let's say someone has a teenager and they buy a couple of shares of stock. What's your take on that? Because I'm a firm believer that you have to prepare your children for life, because you know, provide food and clothing. That's basic. What's your take on investing for children? Because, you know, they have time. That's their, you know, they've got time on their hands. Hopefully.
Right. So that's, again, another excellent question. I said the moment I had my first daughter, I have two girls, my first daughter, and that's probably why I'm so oversensitive to women's issues, because I've had women pretty much throughout my entire life influence my life in a very positive way. So the moment my first daughter was born, I immediately set up a trust fund with $1,000. Period. And that $1,000 was going to not be touched for 18 years.
Wow.
That was her college trust fund. No matter what, I don't care if I couldn't eat, that number, that money was never, ever going to be touched. And when it came time for her to go to college, she had enough money in that trust fund to get her through her first 2 years of a major Midwest university. And my thinking was, and again, it's all about planning and discipline. My thinking was the first 2 years of any college is going to be your more difficult transitional years for a student. And so your third year, you can go to work, you can get a part-time job, you can help offset tuitions in other ways, but you don't want to end up with a huge college debt. And if you're able to at least pay for your first couple of years, which again are also your most expensive years, then you're just way, way ahead of everybody else. But I am a total believer. And again, because of the change in the market today, where you can buy shares of multiple companies at an initial investment price, again, of a pretty minor amount of money, $100, you could own 5 blue chip companies. Even though they're only 1/20th of a share, those are all still stocks that are going to grow. And,
exactly.
And you could do that in a portfolio for each child if you wish to do that.
Now, I've noticed here, and this is just what I see in particular, we've got the pandemic that's occurred, and a lot of people, especially low wage earners in particular, a lot of single moms, because being a mom is very difficult to try to, you know, propel yourself to the next level when you have children to take care of. You know, you're working, so we all know how that can get. But I will say this, I've noticed it's like the have and the have nots. What I am seeing, and also from a personal experience, people that have invested prior to when this event came, those individuals, they're faring quite well. And when I say we have the have and have nots, I mean people that invested earlier on or just started investing before this happened. When this event came, the pandemic, guess what? They were able to ride the wave. And then we have people that didn't. Those turn out to be the have nots, who were basically relying on the stimulus checks to get them through. And I don't mean just as a cushion, I mean for survival. So what is your point on that? Because, you know, I mean, it's basically is the have and have nots. Even now I'm seeing that. You have one set of people who they're buying houses, 50,000 over the ask. And then we have another set where people are saying, hey, I'm afraid of being evicted. You think if they invested, you know, we could have avoided that, or maybe it wouldn't be so difficult?
Well, you definitely could have avoided it. I mean, keep in mind today, I mean, just to give you all a thought, today Target announced their earnings, okay, and Lowe's did as well. Target in the last year, now keep in mind this last year was a pandemic year, Target increased its stock share 85%.
Wow.
If you invested $100 in Target stock a year ago in the middle of the pandemic, your stock value would now be worth $185.
Wow.
I mean, think about it. I mean, that's ridiculous money in terms of overall percentage, but that is in fact if you just extrapolate that $100 to maybe $1,000. And I know some people can't come up with that. I totally understand that. In fact, I've been there one or two times in my life where $50 was a big deal. But that's the whole idea of being disciplined. So, and the other part of that, depending again on your age, you need to, even if you're in the lowest income strata, on your age, got to be aware of taxes, because the idea with taxes and rich people, okay, it's not that rich people don't want to pay taxes, but what they don't want to do, or what they want to do, is keep their capital. And nobody talks about that. They all talk about, well, let's tax the rich because they got all this money. But that's not true. What the rich people are doing is they're keeping their capital by way of understanding the tax code. And they can afford to have very high-priced Beverly Hills attorneys taking care of their tax problems for them. And then consequently, they don't pay any taxes or very little taxes at all.
Yeah, and that's one thing people don't understand. You know, all they hear is like, oh my gosh, you have this amount of money and you didn't pay any taxes. And it's like, it's the tax law. And also tax law, it is so preferential to business owner. The W-2 pays more taxes than anybody. The business owners pay less. Can you explain why? Because people they begin to into head mode, they don't get it. And they're like, oh, that's not fair. Can you explain why that is?
Yeah, I mean, it's actually pretty simple. Okay, if you're a W-2 employee, you essentially have no tax deductions.
Yeah.
Depending on the state you're in, okay, and there's uniqueness to every state. Your tax deduction might be limited only to the interest. And again, we're assuming you have a house here. So it might be interest deduction only to a property. If you're a renter, you and your W-2, you have no tax deductions. A person that forms a small corporation or a small company, or for that matter, even as a sole proprietor, just uses their names in a small business environment, you then write off your car, you write off the fuel, the maintenance, you write off all those things associated with your vehicle, your internet security software, every little thing that is part of your business, you can take a percentage of as a write-off. And that absolutely just goes right to the bottom line of your tax liability. And so consequently, instead of paying taxes, you might get a bigger refund.
And that's one
because of that.
Yes, that's one thing I'm glad you mentioned, because a lot of women, a lot of people, male and female, they are starting these side hustles, online businesses, and they need to know for sure when you file your taxes, please keep records, because you have deductions, okay, that a W-2 won't have. You may have a W-2 and that business. So isn't it important for them to understand the taxes, keep the receipts, maybe consult with an accountant, because you can't just have a business, so, oh, it's my hobby, and your W-2, and then you miss out on the tax breaks. That's what I would hate to happen. So what would you suggest?
That's right. And so you really, and I know this might get a little technical, but the truth is you've got to be able to balance. Even if you work full time, let's say you have a W-2 job and you're working 8 hours a day, and at night you run a small retail internet business, okay?
Mm-hmm.
You have the ability to take all that retail business expenses, or a percentage, frankly, of your home or apartment as an office, all the equipment associated with it, all that in what's called a Schedule C on your tax returns. And so what that really, and again, I don't want to make this sound tough, because it's not. Okay, I want to make sure I reinforce that. It is not tough. What it does is it means you sit down and read. That's what's going to get down to it. Just read a little bit, or get somebody that you know, and even an H&R Block today will do a Schedule C for you for your business expenses. So you want to be able to keep good records. And by the way, after 3 years, if you don't start showing activity in that business that you're running, the IRS will consider it a hobby, and then you lose all your tax write-offs. So you do have to be active in your business, even showing some kind of revenue. Okay, and you can lose money, which is, by the way, okay too, because that's all tax write-off. But you have to show activity, otherwise the IRS will consider it to be a hobby, and then you'll lose everything.
Now, one last thing, and I do want to have more than one video with you. Can you explain? Okay, let's say you're starting a business and you're buying a computer and all this fun stuff, and you're getting your supplies. First year or so.
That's a tax write-off.
Yes.
All of it is. Just save your receipts.
Exactly.
Even if you use it for personal use, that's not the way you're going to define it when you buy it. You're going to define it as the business, not for personal use. Okay. And again, keep in mind your internet expenses, your Spectrum TV, if you use that kind of service, the security software you're buying, your VPN, if you're using a VPN, all those items now become your cell phone expense, by the way.
Yep.
You can take up to 50% of your personal cell phone expense as a business write-off. This is how wealthy people actually keep their money. This is how they do it.
Exactly.
It's not this attitude about all rich people make money and we got to take that money from them. It's not. They have figured out how to conserve their money. And that's the message I would share with your audience, is that it's not about spending, it's about conservation and the discipline to use the system to help you secure that future for you and your family. Awesome.
Well, I wanted to get to, and I know time is of the essence, I want to say one last thing. I've read the book initially called A Random Walk Down Wall Street, and it talks about some people say, oh my gosh, I don't have the money to invest. Well, guess what some of those people did? And I was like, this is awesome. Some people actually worked because the main income took care of their family and themselves. I've read where some people actually took on a second job, and it wasn't to go shop or just have fun vacation. They took on a second job and used all that money to invest, and then they ended up being like millionaires. So what do you think the probability of doing that today?
So I can tell you at a personal level, since the day I left the Marine Corps and started working for a company, which was in my early 20s, up and through probably my mid-50s, I always had a second job. And that second job was a tax write-off to me. Always. I built an insurance agency. I built an insurance adjustment business. But those were always after my W-2 income, until I got to a point where I could then make the financial decision to move forward with my my secondary job, because it was always my goal to be in business for myself. I really did not want to work for anybody else because I knew that was not going to build growth and income for me. You have to be self-employed to do that.
Okay, and last thing I want to say, because my channel is geared, of course, toward women. What do you say to a single mom who's supporting her entire family? She wants to invest, but there's always a concern of, oh my, if I put 500 or 1,000 here, I might need that money later for my child or for other expenses. Do you have any comments on that?
I do, and I would say to you this: don't ever put your family at risk. I'm a very big family guy, so you need to know that up front. Don't ever put your family at risk. But what I would say is that you don't have to put $500 or $1,000 in the market today. You can start with 100.
Yes.
And just be disciplined enough to just say every month, if it's possible, every month I'm going to add another $100. With the technology that's out there today and all the free brokerage services that are out there today that don't have commissions, you can actually buy some really inexpensive stocks that, in fact, you and I have bought together, okay, that have just exploded in the last 18 to 24 months.
Crazy.
To a multiple of I think in one case, two of our stocks at least jumped about, one was over 100%.
Oh, yeah, 200%, yeah.
Yeah, and these both these stocks were started out at $8 a share. One was at $8 a share, and the other one was at like
$7.
15.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We got quite a few.
You just have to be disciplined enough. You just have to take your time and don't worry about what anybody else says, but take your time and just take baby steps, if you will, because today, in today's world, let's be honest about it, this is a matriarchal society. Women really have the power in this society to do whatever you want. You absolutely have that power.
Great. Well, listen, thank you so very, very much. I did receive emails requests for this to occur. This will not hopefully be our last video. Thank you so much. And again, we look forward to hearing from you again. Thank you so much.
Outstanding. Thank you.
Bye.